Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Clear the Vapor Conversation series. We're really excited to have you all here today. We're just going to give a couple more seconds for people to join us, and then we're going to get started. So I'm just going to wait a few short seconds to let more people come in as we enter for this evening's Clear the Vapor Conversation. All right, I see a bunch more people have joined. I said a few seconds. I really meant a few seconds. Good evening and good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us today for our Clear the Vapor Conversation series. My name is Shana Bedi. I am an advocacy and education manager at Parents Against Vaping. I'm very excited to welcome you all here today. Please note that if you registered for today's webinar, so that means that if you got the link for the Zoom for today, you will get the recording and the slides will be shared with you. In addition, you'll also get all of our speakers' emails so that you can follow up with them if you want to learn more and get more information. And all of that will be sent to you in a follow-up email after our conversation has concluded. So for today's conversation, we want you to feel free to please drop in any questions that you might have in the chat. My colleague Austin and I will be answering those along the way. And then also at the end, we will be doing a brief Q&A session. So please do stick around for that. I really appreciate those who have joined during their dinner time or pre-dinner time, whatever it may be. We really appreciate you taking the time out to join us today. So please do stick around for that brief Q&A session at the end so you can get some questions answered live. So a little bit about today's conversation. As schools face the growing challenge of youth vaping, too many are still turning to ineffective and in some cases harmful discipline policies like suspension or expulsion. These punishments don't stop vaping and they don't acknowledge the child's addiction. They isolate students, disrupt learning, and can push young people further away from the support that they need. Today's Ask the Expert series, Listening to Students, Leading with Care, features a conversation with restorative practice expert Leanne Dodge and public health professionals Claire Schroeder and Selena Ranger. And last certainly but not least, we will also be joined by a few students at the end for a very exciting and real conversation. So I'm going to introduce our speakers now. Leanne Dodge is a certified prevention specialist and the program director of SoPo Unite, All Ages, All in South Portland, Maine, one of the drug-free communities coalitions. She has worked in the field of prevention for over 25 years. She has worked with community coalitions across the state and has worked on college campuses in Maine and New Hampshire. Leanne has also led transformative policy changes in schools, replacing zero-tolerance approaches with restorative practices that keep students engaged, connected, and supported while addressing substance use head-on. We also have Claire Schroeder. She joined the Cumberland County Public Health team in August as the school and community builder. The focus for Claire's work has always been to center the perspective of those whose systems seek to serve, such as young people, to build collaborative partnerships and to balance power. And Selena Ranger has worked in schools for over 25 years as a teacher, principal, and tobacco treatment specialist. As a part of Cumberland County Public Health, she goes into high schools and supports students who have either had school violations around nicotine or want to self-refer in order to explore cutting back or quitting nicotine use. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leanne to start the conversation. And as just a reminder again, if you do have any questions along the way, please feel free to type it in the chat and we'll answer it along the way. Leanne?
Thank you so much. So good night. Good evening, everyone. So glad to be here. And I just want to really encourage you all to think about using some of the practices and policies that we're going to share with you in your communities and in your schools, because They really do work. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of history about our policy and our athletic code that we changed back in 2018, and I will in a minute, but I just want to share the importance of doing this work now. What we know about the brain is that the brain is best for learning from 13 to 20 without much effort. So you'll know young people who, we have students that speak 5 languages fluently. I kind of know English. We have students that know like 6 instruments or play 4 sports. All of those great things in this key time of the brain is really great stuff. Now, you can still learn after 20, but it's more difficult. And so this is a key moment in time that we have access to young people is when they're in school, middle school, high school. And we also know that the brain, the part of the brain that's ready to take risks is fully developed at age 13. So we actually want young people to take risks, healthy risks, try another instrument, try out for the play, meet new friends. Otherwise, they'll be living in your basement when they're 40. I know that's not too funny, but so it's ready to take risks at 13, but not till the mid 20s does the brain say, hey, that wasn't a good idea. So we got a window here. The other key thing about that great sponge of a brain time is that 90% of addiction starts before the age of 18. So again, I always feel like we have this window of opportunity to work with young people and to turn things around sooner than waiting till later. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our school policy that we changed in 2018 and also our athletic code. And I'll just tell you that's, we made these changes when I first started here. My office actually is in the high school, so I've been really lucky to be right in the midst of things. And just learning about the old policy where if a student was caught using a substance, they were kicked out of school suspension for 7 to 10 days. So 10 days means 2 whole weeks of being out of school. And so we know that that does not work. So people fell behind academically. There was a lot of shame and stigma of being kicked out. And we had a chief of police at the time who said, you know what, when you kick a student out of school, they're not at home, they are out and about. And so just kind of getting all the sectors of a community together to kind of go, you know what, this is not working. But what could work is restorative practice and doing interventions with students who might need them. And that could really encourage connection. One of the things we say in substance use prevention and beyond is that connection is the opposite of addiction. And if we can have this opportunity to connect with young people, then we're going to have better outcomes. And one of the things that I will say too is for many years, I taught the class for folks who've been arrested for operating under the influence. And in some of your states, you might call it driving under the influence. And many of the students who took the course, you have to take it to get your license back. Many of them had been suspended, expelled, kicked off of athletic teams when they were in high school. So that's always my focus is, wow, what if we could get to you sooner before you ended up an OUI on average costs $10,000. You can't get into Canada. It screws with your financial aid, you know, all these not good things. But what if we could address this sooner while we have access to young people and can work with them? So we changed our policy and our athletic code. Now, some schools will, if you get in trouble as an athlete, the second time, you're banned from sports all 4 years. And when you think about protective factors for many students, athletics or being involved in clubs and activities is so protective of them and opportunities to connect. So imagine going, yep, you'll never play again. Take care. And so we changed our athletic code and our substance use policy. And here it is. And we are going to just walk you through it. So if someone now, instead of just like go home for 2 weeks of school, now instead, what happens if someone was caught vaping or what have you? The first meeting, part of that was they meet with the assistant principal. There's a wellness check with the school nurse to make sure they're okay. Sometimes our school resource officer might be involved and might, you know, confiscate the substances that they might be using. And then we call the parents, come and get your child. And here's what's going on. And then the next slide will show you what happens the next day. So the next day they come back to school and they get assessed by a social worker like Selena, who's going to talk afterwards. We'll talk about her, again, someone who's trained in that. But so we have social work staff and they can kind of assess, wow, really, this was the first time I've ever done it. Or, well, I've been doing this for a couple of years and I can't stop. So there's a continuum. And so that really helps us figure out, well, what does a student need then as a response? And our student will spend one day in school restorative coordinator classroom with one of our staff who's trained in restorative practice. And the student has to fill out a behavior chain or the restorative questions. I'll read to you really quick. So they write out what happened, what were you thinking at the time, what have you thought about since, who's been affected by what you've done. So maybe someone was vaping in a classroom in the back row of their class. What can you do to make things right and how can we support you? So a student does that in that day and maybe do some interventions. And then there's a response meeting with the parent, the student, the social worker, the assistant principal, and figure out, well, what makes sense for the student? What do they need? And here's a number of interventions. Again, that Selena's going to talk about some of those. And again, for students who repeat, maybe this is their second or third violation now, we've added two pieces. One is community service, and that's not picking up trash in an orange jumpsuit in front of people to embarrass them, but more, they got to do it at a community agency that works with youth. So the Boys and Girls Club or the Teen Center, so that they may be connected to another healthy adult that already works with young people. And it's 10 hours, but the hours aren't as important as let's make another connection with this student. And they also will need to meet with our behavioral health liaisons who work through the police department, but those are also social workers and they can meet with the student outside. They can meet them at the skate park, at their home. They don't have to do it in school if they want some more privacy. And again, another healthy adult in the community to connect with them. And then the last slide about this is, well, after that piece, and they've done those parts, maybe done some interventions with the social worker, or community service or whatever makes sense for that specific student. There's not one size fits all. And then they do a re-entry meeting with, again, the parents and the assistant principal and kind of talk about, well, looking forward, what can we do to support you so that this doesn't happen again? So a last couple of things I want to tell you about, and then I'm passing it on, that substance use is not a moral failing. It's a clinical issue. And that we really need to look at, if we're kicking kids out of school, what do you think they're going to be doing during that time? There's shame and stigma of doing that, kicking people out. And really what has improved is not only the students' behavior, so our substance use violations have gone down, as we had hoped over time would happen, but also the relationships have improved with parents, teachers, coaches. Back in the day, if we, a teacher like, hey, if I notice this kid looks impaired, they're going to be out of my classroom for like a week or two. Maybe she's just tired. So now we've got teachers who are on board and have an understanding. We even taught a course to the teachers so they understood what restorative practice is. And restorative practice is not a fun little hug, say you're sorry. It's an adult process that really holds someone accountable, but also gives them support and intervention. And one of the things we also added was that there's a voluntary part of the code where you can come forward and say, hey, I'm struggling. So before I even get caught, I think I need some help. And you can bring one of your peers down too with you, like, hey, I'm worried about you. And again, that's with our athletic code. And I'll just say about the athletic code that that's a process very similar. Now, you used to kick kids off the team for 14 days. Do not come to games. Do not step on the field. Do not wear your uniform. Out. Second time, 10 weeks off the team. Do not come to anything. Now they can still go to meetings and practices. They can't play in games for 10 days, but they too, as athletes, need to do restorative circle with their coach and maybe a captain. And that has been very positive for students because we know that, and we'll talk with our students. You'll get to hear from 3 of our students today about why, having that kind of a strict athletic code does not work either. So I will pass this on now to Selena, and I will mute myself.
Thanks, Leanne. We're going to continue delving into what you all can do to help promote connections and also ideas that you all can incorporate to ensure that consequences are still grounded in connection and accountability. So there's so much value in how restorative practice can begin to shift relationships and environments. First, you need to find a starting place that works for you. It could be your dining room table, another parent, or your local school board or a school administrator. It's totally up to you and what fits best. We looked at the questions before we began, and a lot of you had asked questions about where to start. And what that's really going to depend on where you have existing relationships and opportunities. So we'll talk about some different things along the way. And again, you'll find what fits best for you. On the screen here, we have some examples of protective factors that can help keep young people, thank you, Claire, could help keep young people from engaging in risky behavior. And if you look at the pieces on here, half of them have to do with those connection pieces, from family bonds to social supports to community connections. So you can see how important that is, which gets back to what Leanne was saying in the sense of those connections are very important, because without those, people can feel lost. In addition, you have that piece of building up the person, and that's others helping, but also the person doing it themselves, developing coping skills, also embracing healthy mistakes and prioritizing self-care. Both of those are important. And also helping teens to find their passion, which can be super helpful if they have started to use nicotine as an example, and they're looking for ways to help them cut back on that. Here we have 2 prevention resources. So again, there are many out there. Here are 2 examples. The first one is Catch My Breath, and it is an in-school curriculum for grades 5 through 12. And it informs the youth about the harms of commercial tobacco. Cumberland County Public Health, which is where Claire and I work, use it as a train the trainer model, where we train school staff so that they can implement it in classrooms. And this allows for greater sustainability since they're building capacity within their own school. Another resource is Sidekicks. This is an evidence-based curriculum for grades 6 through 12, and it builds motivational interviewing skills for youth. And so if you're not sure what motivational interviewing is, that helps someone to find their own internal motivation. It's not about telling someone what to do or how to do it, but it's using their own knowledge of themselves, because nobody knows themselves better than the self. This is a workshop that trains youth for peer-to-peer support, and it is currently getting an update. So if you search for it, just be on the lookout. It is a new and improved version is on its way. This is where I spend most of my time as a tobacco treatment specialist. I'm doing that treatment piece. And I am one of those coaches that talks in person. I always think about these sorts of options as tools in a toolbox. Everyone's quit journey is different. And so it's important to have different tools that you can pull from, because not everyone or the same ones are going to work for each person. So that's where that motivational interviewing comes in. When I'm talking to students, I'm asking them questions. It would be so easy as adults, right? One of the questions had to do with, how do I get my student, or how do I get a student? And it would be so easy for us to just tell them what to do. Don't do it. And that always makes me chuckle, because I think, did that work for us when we were their age? And absolutely it didn't. So it's about asking open-ended questions. Tell me about your nicotine use. So I didn't say a yes or a no question. It was open-ended. It allowed for them to expand upon it. What is your goal around nicotine use? What do you enjoy for activities? What do you do in your free time? So again, that's exploring the person and what they are interested in and what they are all about. And from there, you're able to help build a plan to support the student based on what they deem is needed for them. I'm going to go to the bottom right-hand corner. And so there are also online teen quit services. One of them is My Life, My Quit. And again, it's confidential, just like the one that I was doing. Of course, like with me, if a student has an infraction, then the family will know that they're meeting with me, but the information is confidential. So My Life, My Quit, as an example, has trained coaches. They have been trained to work with teens. And so a teen can join via text messaging, online chat, or by phone. Now, I'll say, if any of you would like to see what the program is like, what the registration is like, if you go to register on My Life, My Quit, and you put test with your first name, so for me, it would be Test Selena, I can then go through and answer the questions. I can explore, see what there are for resources, but the people at My Life, My Quit will know that that data needs to get pulled because it doesn't have any impact. So I found it very helpful to see what the student would experience before they went through it. And the last piece that I have on the slide is talking with a medical provider. So the American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend the off-brand use of NRT, nicotine replacement therapy, which is your nicotine gum, nicotine lozenges, and your nicotine patches. It is a tool that students can use, again, under medical supervision, but for students that are addicted to nicotine and need that extra support, that can be valuable. And you may find when you talk to a medical provider that you're going to have to help to educate them, because I don't think that is something that is widely known, but it's an important tool just as the other ones to have so that you can best support your student. All right, Claire.
That was you passing it to me. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here, first of all. So thank you for just being a part of this effort. And one piece you've heard us all say, but we really want to emphasize is the importance of you having some clear takeaways, some starting points in your community. So Leanne helped us see how impactful policy can be. And she also does a huge amount of work and the continuous work she does to build power with young people and staff throughout the schools. And so you'll be hearing from some of those young people in a moment. Selena also shared with us the power of that one-on-one connection, right? Grounded in empathy and curiosity, those open-ended questions that she just spoke to. And I'm going to share a little bit with you about how groups can be a starting place for using restorative practices. It's important to understand that groups can provide a sense of belonging, which is critical protective factor. And additionally, when adults in spaces with young people are caring, compassionate, and have consistent messages about the harms of vaping or substance use, it can go a long way in preventing those risky behaviors that Leanne was talking about at the beginning. So one of the pieces I want to start with in terms of a starting point here in Cumberland County is oftentimes in this work, we focus on those end results and it can feel like we walked some perfect pathway to get here, right? But the reality is that this work is slow, it's relational, and mistakes and failures are just part of the process. So I want you to have a starting point, and so I want you to also be thinking about where can you leverage your relationships so that connections to begin to be restorative rather than punitive, right? To infuse connection rather than disconnection. So I was doing a little bit of work with Cumberland County about a year ago, and we started offering what were called community building circles that were open for any student to attend. And halfway into the year, when I started working with CCPH, there would be times when there was just 1 or 2 students at circle. And it made me think, is this working? Like, does this make sense? Like, are we shifting culture if no one's here, right? I had a lot of doubt and questions of like, it's supposed to look like this perfect thing. And at the same time that those circles were happening, we were also building rapport with school staff, right? We were curious about their work. They were curious about our work in prevention. And again, we were curious about their experiences. We were curious about the experiences of students. And this shared curiosity allowed for the development of a relationship not based on transactions, but rather on getting to know and understand each other and that school community. And so again,
these are different starting points, right? There's groups and circles, and then there's those staff relationships. But another piece I want to add, and both Leanne and Celine have talked about this in different ways, as choice points or voluntary, but a really important starting point does have to do with choice. And this connects to the piece on the screen about listening to students even when it's hard. So one thing I appreciate that I learned from Selena was asking for permission. Or so if you're working with a student and you're curious about their journey or quit experience or vape use, asking them, are you open to my thoughts about vaping? Are you open to hearing what I'm thinking? And here's the important part. If they say no, that you honor that no. That no is powerful and an essential part of restorative practices and the process. And so this doesn't just apply to vaping, of course. In circles, if a student chooses to pass, that is their choice and their use of their power. And it's so important that we listen to those choice points. So I want to give you one more example about listening to students even when it's hard. And this is in a group setting. At one school, students were asked to join a circle because there was some vaping happening in the bathroom. And they were strongly encouraged to attend. And again, remember, that then doesn't feel like a choice point, right? And so at one of those early circles, one of my colleagues asked the students if it was okay for the school administrators to be a part of the circle. And the students said no. They said, we don't want them here. And I just want you to think about that for a moment. Like, you're the principal of a school and your students ask you to leave the space. There's a ton of power in that. And there's power also in listening to that and getting up and leaving the room. And that's what this administrator chose to do. And that action allowed those students to experience being listened to, and those students got to lead. And so we can't always do that. I'm well aware of that, but I wanted to lift up those stories because the beginning can be bumpy, it can be messy, and it can feel like you're failing. And even if the circles had ended there, I truly believe there would have been a lot of learning that happened between students and school staff and for us as partners. That wasn't the end of this journey with restorative practice in those schools. But I believe the reason it wasn't the end was because a circle practice that set the stage for shared learning was happening, and that multiple relationships between outside partners and school staff and students, all of which was based on respect and community building. So I want to tell you where we went because we are really proud of this piece. So we continued to listen to the needs of students and the school. And what I have written up on the slides are part of that district's behavioral response protocol. And these are just two, the non-parts in bold, are just two of the core values that are highlighted in that protocol. And I chose those because they directly align with restorative practice and how we run our circles and groups. So right now, we have two schools that are using the direct response to vaping concerns are using circles or groups. And each of those is very different. Sorry. Each of those responses is very different, right? But the vaping is the concern and the school is doing a circle response. And so I'll walk through exactly what that looks like, but they're different because they're customized to the unique needs of that school. So at one school, the response looks like a group circle that follows a restorative framework and embodies this idea of interventions that strengthen student connection, foster accountability, and repair harm. At the other school, the response to vaping is a group that meets 4 times and follows the Stanford REACH Tobacco Toolkit curriculum. And both options are done with that respect, dignity, and that sense of belonging that is so critical in terms of protective factors. So I just have 2 more slides, and what I want you to know is we're using this same approach, this same restorative approach, and how we're thinking about our work with parents. So parents are the experts on many things, their family, their child, the unique strengths and challenges of their child and family. And in this workshop, that is currently under construction. It doesn't exist yet, but what we're doing is we're honoring that expertise while building on restorative practices such as connection, empathy, and the motivational interviewing that Selena talked about. We are excited to be in those spaces, learning from parents and learning about what works best in terms of prevention. So to end, before the students share much more and bring this all to life, is there are more resources than we could possibly name. And these are ones that we find ourselves sort of reaching to or leaning on, and they can be just a really useful reference point moving forward. Each of them, a couple of them Selena highlighted, but each of them has a slightly different focus and is a great starting point for supporting schools and organizations to implement evidence-based curriculum into their school day, whether that's for all students in health classes or for specific groups of students or one-on-one with students. And without further ado, Leanne, I'm going to pass it to you to introduce our students.
Great. And so I think we're going to go full screen so we can meet our great students here. And we have Olive and Jose and Lucas here. And I'm wondering if each of you wouldn't mind just coming off your mutes and introducing yourselves, maybe just telling us what grade you're in and if you're involved in any clubs or extracurricular activities. That would be great, just so people get to know you a little bit. And then, so I know Olive's going to be starting us off, but maybe if all three of you could introduce yourselves first. So Olive, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, my name's Olive. I am a junior in high school, so 11th grade, and I'm at South Portland High School.
And are you involved in any like clubs or athletics or anything like that, musicals?
Yeah, so I'm in SoPo Unite as we're presenting right now. I'm also involved in Outing Club. I just went whitewater rafting this past weekend, and then I'm also involved in softball. So.
Great, thank you. And Jose, tell us about you.
My name is Jose. I'm also a junior in South Portland High School. I am currently involved in track, Black Student Union, SoPo Unite, and I think that's it.
Okay, and Lucas, tell us what you're involved in and a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Lucas. I'm a junior at South Portland High School. I'm involved in SoPo Unite, Active Minds, which is like a mental health advocacy club, a pre-med club, which I just joined today, and I play Ultimate Frisbee.
Great, thank you all. So I'm going to be asking each of these three folks some questions and get some feedback from them. And one of the most important things I know is to involve youth in prevention. And when you think about like, again, when I started here, people are like, don't even bother working with the students. They're too busy. They don't have time for this. And luckily we were able to start a youth committee as part of our broader coalition, which started with a handful of students and now has had close to 500 students involved in this group. And the alumni who started this have graduated college a couple of years ago and are still involved in this work and come back and meet with the high school students and talk about what life after high school is like. We have a lot of siblings in this group. Jose and Lucas both have older siblings that were in SoPo Unite. But what I'm going to start off with is with talking with Olive. And Olive, tell us a little bit how students were involved in changing our substance use policy and our athletic code.
Yeah, so one of our big like prevention initiatives were banning flavored tobacco products in South Portland. We actually had 2 members of our high school like present to the student or to the city council, and it ended up passing. Originally we thought this would only work for kids who are already using, but or for kids that haven't used yet. But we got some feedback from some kids talking with our staff and social workers that they ended up quitting because their suppliers were charging more for these flavored products because they were harder to get. We also have kids, a part of our group in the middle school and the high school, that we are trained in the Sidekicks program. And many students have talked about how they felt like way more confident in helping their friends when it comes to using substances and helping their friends get help when they need it. Um, and one more thing, we did create a bathroom video last year, kind of like informing all of the students and like focusing on the impact of vaping in the bathroom and how it affects other kids. Um, we also had one of our social workers talk about the intervention resources that we have for kids, especially My Life, My Quit, which has been a big one.
Yeah. And just back to the beginning of this, like, were students involved in the policy change and the athletic code change? It might be at the top there about what did students, when we first kind of said, hey, we're going to do this policy where you have to meet with your parents and a social worker and assistant principal and the restorative, what was the reaction students had when we were like, let's do this elaborate process?
Yeah. So at first, like a lot of kids were like, I think we'd rather be suspended because it was just a lot of steps. And like with the athletic code, athletes did a panel for coaches and talked about how there's like secrecy on teams, and like if an athlete is using substances, they feel like it's not their place to kind of like get help for their friends. Um, but I think as it's went on, kids have became a lot more open about talking with adults. But yeah, I think at first the reaction was like, "Oh, we'd rather be suspended."
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. And at the end, I'm going to ask you all a few questions too, just about your involvement. So the next person is to talk to is Jose, and we did an activity last week with our group, which has close to 60 people in it now this year. Kind of anonymous post-its around the wall with questions on it from students' perspective. And Jose, one of the questions was, what should parents know about substance use? So could you give us some of those responses?
Yeah, of course. So there's a bunch of a lot anonymous questions, but we boiled it down to these responses. Parents should know how substances can affect their children's future. Parents should know the long-term effects of allowing their children to use substances, how to help their children that are using, and that anger can create resentment. They should also be more understanding. Parents should know how to help their kids, and they should also make their child feel comfortable about talking to them about using substances. Strict rules don't prevent children from using or trying substances, and they should have open communication rather than just saying no with no explanation. There's also strict parents make sneaky kids, discourage substance use, and don't shame your kid for it. Students are actively trying to lessen substance use, and the biggest one, in my personal opinion, is that their habits can become the children's habits.
Yes, thank you so much. And another question, Lucas, was why should youth be involved in substance use prevention?
I think it's important because like we set examples, like we're positive role models for other people our own age or younger, maybe younger siblings or just younger children that we know. It can there's a lot of stigma around substance use, but I think when kids see people, even if they don't know them, but they see people in their school who are it kind of normalizes it, make it not only like a way that people are gonna normalize substance use and start using more, but they're not so scared to talk about it, I guess. And I think also youth being involved in substance prevention, it's people don't want to talk to adults, especially parents, but they can relate a lot more to youth. And yeah.
Yeah. And another question for you, Lucas, is why do people use substances? That was another one.
I think that there are a lot of reasons. A lot of times, like peer pressure, people want to fit in. They see all of their friends doing substances. They may not want to, but like they're going to do it just so they don't like seem uncool. And that can lead to addictions. Once you start, it's really hard to stop. I think it can provides an escape when people are struggling with their mental health and they have no support. They're going to it's an easy thing to turn to relieve that. Like maybe they're just curious, which is if it has it's not so rare to see people vaping. Like you're gonna see that happening, and if you want to try it and if you don't know the risks of it, that can cause problems.
Yeah. Thank you all. So just to open up to all three of you, what would it be like in our school if we still had the old, you could get kicked out for up to 2 weeks of school? What would our culture be like here in South Portland High School if that's how we still did it? Like, you're out of here, you're off the team, don't come to the game. Anybody got a response to that? Yeah, Olive.
I think like Lucas, Jose, and me know how like difficult it is to miss even a day of school and just how like late you get and behind you get on work. So it's definitely not like it's it's not the best way to promote being a better student because it sets you back even more. Um, and kids that are already using, they're not going to stop using just because they get 2 weeks off of school. And I think that we are all knowing of that, especially when you're kicked off of sports teams, because that's one of the best parts of school for a lot of kids. So
Yeah,
Ability
thanks.
of Olive, if you are kicked off or if you're kicked out of school for around 2 weeks, you're most likely gonna go back to you're gonna go back to using substances. On top of that, they've done studies saying that if you miss around 10 days of school, you're not gonna be on track for graduation. And guess how many weeks, how many days of school you lose in 2 weeks?
Yeah, 10 days. That's it. Yeah. And what about, would there be shame and stigma happening in the school if people kind of knew, like, oh, Lucas got kicked out? What would that feel like for a student going, hey, now people know, like, where you been? Oh, did you get kicked out? Like, what would that feel like that peers knew that you've been gone? Lucas, you got any thoughts about that? What that might feel like?
I think it can be like pretty shameful. And like Jose said, they're gonna just keep using. And when that like feeling of where shame is created, they're not gonna want to talk about it. They're gonna be less likely to seek out support, I think. And I think like I've experienced this, like people word spreads really easily. So people are aware when that happens. You hear it multiple times throughout a school day.
Yeah. And what might be some positive things about this restorative practice? Like, okay, so now someone didn't miss school. They might get the help they need. What are your thoughts about that? Like, wow, does this work for somebody?
I know that a lot of kids that have gone through the restorative process, they've created a lot better relationships with their teachers and social workers. And that definitely gives people an outlet of somebody to talk to, even if it's not about substances, because people's homes life might not be the best. And rather than staying at home with these people that might not be able to help you, you're at school with trained professionals that are able to give you a better outlet.
Yeah. Other thoughts too from you folks? And how about the athletic code that now someone's not kicked off a team? Do you have any thoughts about that, Jose? Like, now someone can still play and
The athletic code might be the best outcome out of this whole new restorative part, just because a lot of people tend to the hope it could be somebody's reason why they're not like actively using if they're in athletics. Like I know a ton of people outside of the school that that have used substances but don't use them often as soon as sports season comes around for them. And not kicking them out honestly might be the best part of it, just because if you do kick them out, they have nothing to do after school. They're not caught up in anything. They're probably not going to do their homework. They'll probably do it to a point where it's like they're just barely passing, but it keeps them in the athletics program. And if they don't have that anymore, they're definitely going to be using substances again.
Yeah. Any last thoughts about youth, why youth should be in prevention and doing this work, not just old people telling you what to do? What has that been like to be part of SoPo Unite or making some positive changes in the community? What does that feel like?
I think it can feel pretty just good. Like, it's nice to feel like you're doing something, like making people's lives better. And I think it's a very like positive like atmosphere in like the club meetings, you know, just like people are like happy to be there. And it's like we do a lot of activities, like even if they're not directly related to substance use, like the gambling book and stuff, that we're doing something like tangible.
I'm personally, I feel proud actually doing this work because I have little siblings and they tell me about people who do substances in their school, especially my little sister. And I don't want her to be in a place where she isn't exactly the safest. Like she she wants to do big things in life, and a lot of other people probably want to do those same things, but are being affected by substances and don't know how to access these resources to quit. So if I'm doing this work, I'm affecting my little sister, and she's affecting her peers and maybe even the people younger than her.
Yeah, that's great. I'm wondering, Selena and Claire are on here, if they have any questions for the students. We're getting down to the last few minutes of this webinar. If there's questions, Shauna, that you want us to answer from the crowd, or Selena or Claire, if you have any questions for the students too.
I want to say just your insight is incredible. And just, again, your insight, what you see, what you realize, and the fact that it's important for you to make an impact. It's great for us old people too, to hear that.
Yeah, I really appreciate y'all being on. There is actually a question in the chat about just like what inspires you to be a part of this work. And I know you've answered that in different ways, but I don't know if you wanted to add anything else about it.
I could add on that my older sister got me into SoPo Unite, and I was pretty reluctant at first because I personally don't do any substances, but I know people who use them, and I didn't. And I've talked to them about it, and they've never really said that they wanted support. But when my sister introduced me, it SoPo Unite taught me that they don't always need to come to you first. You should go to them just to see if they're willing to try. Because if they're willing to try, then they're already there.
That's awesome. And all of you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about how even if kids decide not to completely quit substances, it makes them a lot how to drink or smoke, like going all out with it, because there's a lot of kids that have no idea how to drink responsibly. And if like kids our age can just spread that information, I think it does a lot of good, and it prevents a lot of health issues that come later on, or alcoholism, or how to help your friends when they are in trouble. Because I've learned a lot, and especially when kids go off to college or are in that atmosphere without people just telling you no all the time on, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Like, it really makes sure that kids are being safe.
Yeah, that's great. Any thoughts, Lucas?
The question was like, what got us into the club?
Yeah, like what made you kind of say, I want to be part of this?
Yeah, well, similar to like Jose, my older brother was in the club, and I think he was a pretty big part of it. So I was like inspired to do it. Honestly, I was mostly just doing it for that reason. I like admit I wasn't very passionate about substance use at first, but as I got to like, know Leanne and know people in the club, I think like, I'm in my junior year now, especially this year and last year, I've started to do more, and it's nice. I kind of build that desire, I guess.
Yeah, give it a try. And then, yeah, and I'll just share, before we end or answer any questions, the group has done a lot of great initiatives, like Lucas was referring to this book about problem gambling. The students help write this graphic novel, and who knew, but we learned that sometimes problem gambling starts at age 10, and it's closely related to substance use and suicide. So our students, Lucas being one of them, and Jose's older sister, are the characters in the book. And it's now in 23 states with a health class curriculum for 6th through 12th graders. Our students helped write it. They gave feedback on, and Olive, I think you were part of it too, like, what kind of books, the gal who wrote it was like, what kind of books do you guys like to read? And they were like, horror books like Stephen King. You're like, okay. So if you want to ever get this graphic novel that students help write, they're also right now creating a youth map of South Portland, a transportation map with artwork done by students on how to get to healthy places. Like Jose was saying, like if you can't go to sports and you can't get to the teen center, well, it's great we have all these things, but if you can't get there, then it's not really any good for you because you're not attending, you're not being part of stuff. So our students right now are creating this cool map that's going to go for youth on like, how do you take the bus to get to the Boys and Girls Club? So anyway, our students have done some really great stuff, and I'll leave it to answer any questions that might be out there that maybe for the students or Claire, Selena.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that we've got in the chat actually. So I'm just trying to sift through some before we have to end. Let's see here. So I guess regarding helping people quit, etc. Let's see. It's hard. We know it's hard to quit when a teen wants to quit, but they're addicted. So how hard is it for them if they're addicted but they still want to quit? And what would you recommend?
I'll jump in on that one to start off. So absolutely, the students I meet with, they're in high school. Many of them have started 9, 10, 13. So they've been vaping for a long time. And many of them already notice the health impact. They have a difficult time breathing. They can't run up and down the field or the court like they used to. And so it's exploring with them, what is their motivation? And so, and I think it's one of the things I always start out with is, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to figure out what you want and to help guide you in that process. And I think because it comes across as non-threatening, like I'm not telling you to quit, but I'm saying to you, if you want to cut back, let's explore that. And then I'll often say, when you think about your day, try to break it down into small pieces. What would be the easiest time of the day to skip that one vape, that one hit? So it's not like this huge piece, but this one. And then we start to explore, all right, what are you going to do during that time? What is it that interests you? Do you like to go for a run or a bike ride or play a video game or draw? And so using some sort of activity to substitute. And A lot of times we'll talk about flavors. Blue raspberry seems to be a very popular flavor. So we'll look at like blue raspberry Jolly Ranchers. And so just trying to explore the different tools that'll work for that student, because again, it's not a one size fits all, but they experience the anger, the frustration, the feeling of failure if they don't do it. And so again, it's supporting them along their journey.
Thank you. For the young people in the room, do you have any tips on growing a youth-specific group? It seems like, we know that all three of you have shared that you're involved in more than one club and activity. And so, everyone's all over the place, but what would you recommend in terms of some young people who want to start a group of their own? Particularly, this person was asking about rural areas.
I can start off. I know that it really only takes a couple kids, and it definitely helps if those couple kids have friends that you just convince to, I don't know, come to one meeting. And as long as you don't make it like very like a big commitment, I think a lot more people will join. Like you start small and you work your way up. And I know a lot of people have joined SoPo Unite because people say it looks really good on college applicants, and then kind of starts there, and then you get pretty passionate about it as it moves on.
Yeah, that's
With
great
it,
advice. Go ahead, yeah.
if I were to start uh, a club, I'd definitely try to find a teacher or like an adult within the building that that will be willing to take time out of their day to run, host the club. Like Active Minds was just started last year by a couple students and a social worker, and it's now like an official club. And they've done a lot of stuff regarding mental health and all of that, but they it really just comes down to a couple students, like Olive said, and a teacher that's willing to take time out of their day.
I think
You
one
need to
thing
find Leanne. Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, Luke.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important is the schedule, because a lot of like high school students have busy lives. So I think if you find the people that you think may be interested in your club, you should find what days they're available. And then, I think usually mornings can be a good time because people have sports after school. So I think people are always like, a quick excuse is, no, I'm busy. But if you can like circumvent that, I think that'll improve the chances.
And I'll just say too, one of the biggest things that I use is storytelling about their successes. And that, yeah, it started with 5 students. You can see behind me the many pictures of students now that have been in it. But one of my favorite stories is we have a pediatrician on our coalition, and she said she was talking to one of her little 8th grade patients. And she said, "Hey, are you getting nervous about going to the high school?" And this young patient said, "No, there's this group at the high school. They came down and talked to us in our middle school health class. I'm not nervous at all." And so that little story, I think, makes people go, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool. You're not scared," because we know transitions are a really big, risky time for a young person. So I think just using some of those examples of people doing great things, or when people have been trained in the Sidekicks program and have been able to help a friend. I mean, that's huge, that you learn the skills of not like, "Olive, don't you know it's bad for you?" But instead going, "Hey, I can help you through this." Like that's powerful. And these are lifelong skills that young people are learning.
Definitely. I think we probably have time for one more question. I know Austin's trying to help me sift through and pick the best one possibly. So we want to ask the young people one more question. Would you encourage your parents to attend workshops? I know, young people are always attending different things and learning, etc. But if you find out, for example, something like this today, would you encourage or share the information with your parents on, you know, this kind of topic, substance use, or so that the parents can support their young people?
I would definitely share this with my parents. And even though my parents are aware that I don't do substances or they assume I don't do substances or anything like that, it's definitely helpful for parents, friends that also have kids, like, and they're struggling with their kids using substances. It's definitely helpful to have peers, even if they're adults, that are knowledgeable in the subject, and definitely give some good knowledge on how to help it, because not a lot of parents know what to do in that situation.
I personally talk to my mom and my dad sometimes about all the SoPo Unite meetings, and they're uninterested, but in most cases they tend to be interested because at some point of my life they were really on me about no using substances, and it was like a pretty pressing time personally because I thought they like knew me a little better than that, but now that I've told them I do this with Miss Leanne and I talk to them about it, they have like an interest because now they know I'm well equipped to talk to my little siblings in the case that they do use substances and my parents don't want to be the ones to talk to them about using substances. So yeah, I definitely would tell my parents about things like this.
I think it's also like a good way for parents to, like, even if substance use isn't something that like teen substance use doesn't really concern them, I think it's always good to, like, know what's happening with kids your age, like your kids age. I don't know how to say it, but like, just be aware of what surrounds your kid's life, even if they're not using substances, and just like be present, I guess.
Definitely. Well, we're a little bit over time, but thank you so much to everyone, all of our panelists, all the wonderful students. We really, really appreciate you taking the time out today to speak with us. We had a lot of questions. I hope my colleague was able to jot them down. We'll get back to you. And also we'll be sharing the emails of everyone. So if you want to get in touch and ask the questions or more questions, we can give you their emails in their follow-up email, and then you can reach out to them yourself and get more information. But thank you again so much. Thank you all for joining. We really appreciate it, and we hope you learned something today. And feel free to share this. Once you get the recording, you can rewatch as many times as you want to. And have a great night, everyone, or afternoon. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank you
bye.
for